This episode of Huff Nation Sports brought to you by SM Realty and Associates, LLC. Contact Karen Alexander at 803-445-7185. Email at KarenAlexander773 at gmail.com. Also, Alpha Insurance Solutions, LLC. Call them at 803-427-1327. And Rockamoss CMOS at rockamoss.com. Produced by 3AM Cinema. You're now tuned in to Huff Nation Sports. Buckle up. Welcome into Huff Nation Sports, Episode 2. Legendary coach Bailey Harris joins me. I am Stacey Huff, your host here at Huff Nation Sports. And, we try to chop it up. We're going to have some legends in the show. We have some players down the road, college and pro and high school. And we're going to try to give homage to all those who out there have done their work and put the work in the world of sports in South Carolina and beyond. And with that being said, Coach Bailey Harris, let me give an introduction the best I can, Coach, and then we're going to jump in there with the conversation. But, it speaks for itself, man. 32 seasons at the bench. First of all, who does that anymore? 13 region championships, 10 Final Four appearances, 6 state championship games. I think I called a couple of those. 96 and 2000, you won the whole thing. 637 and 259, which is absurd numbers. Sixth all-time in South Carolina High School League history for boys basketball. Only 2 losing seasons ever, and South Carolina Basketball Coaches Association Hall of Fame. Let's just start there, and then we'll get to some of your other things you've done. Coach Bailey Harris, thanks for joining me, brother.
Oh man, great to be here, Stacey. Always love to see you on the mic courtside because that means we're in a big game somewhere. So, or to see you MC and remember you MCing some of those all area banquets way back in the day. So
yeah, man,
it's been a while, and always enjoyed listening to you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you, Coach. I enjoy watching you, Coach. I always knew a legend was in the building, and there was an aura about your program. That's what I want to get into first. We're going to take a broad look, and then we're going to chop it up in some eras. It was an aura. Nobody wanted to go to Lexington to play you guys, and it was tough to play over there, and you guys were tough on the road, and you were consistent winners. Your system was your system, and you always knew how to get pieces for your system. So looking back, Coach, 32 years, you've retired now, enjoying golf. We'll get to that some, and relaxing, enjoying your children, grandchildren. Look back, Coach, what does it all mean now in hindsight of all the accomplishments and as you get to excel? How do you look back on your career?
I look back at it, Stacey, and I'm not going to complain with my record. I think my record's good, but that's really not what I want to be judged for. And I really don't think that's what we should ever judge a high school coach on. Like, you should not be judged on your record. Some people are given better talent than others. That's really kind of irrelevant. What I want to be judged on or remembered for is how my players turned out. 15 years down the road, are those guys good? Are they good husbands? Are they good fathers? Are they good in the community? How'd they turn out? Some of those guys I stay in touch with, literally on a daily basis, and then some of them you never see, and you pop in once every 20 years. But to me, the biggest enjoyment looking back on it is getting to catch up. This week I had a chance to play golf with, I think, 5 different alum from all different eras.
Wow.
And to catch back up with those guys and play with one of them's son today and to see, how they're doing in life today. I got a lot of guys out there that are in coaching, and to go watch my former players coach is really, that's as enjoyable as anything for me.
I saw some of it on social media. That coaching tree is wild. We'll time permitted, we will try to get all that in and get to that coach. That coaching tree is becoming legendary in itself. The career was legendary, but the coaching tree is has a life of its own at this point. I saw you out there with some of your guys. It's got to be great, the relationships you've built over the years with your players.
Yeah, that's really the best thing about it. And it's kind of funny because, a lot of those guys, I guess, they didn't hate me, I guess, when they were playing, but it's not like we're buddies when we're playing. And some of those guys Devin Lyfridge and Sheldon Everett and Brett Jones and Ben Lee and those guys. Those are probably my best friends in life. Those guys that if I've got something that's wrong or a big decision or whatever, and it's time to retire, I'm calling those guys, checking with them because they know me better than anybody.
And you're right. Those names you just named, and you could go on and name others. I know most of those guys, and I can attest. I didn't play with them. Some of them are my age, younger and older, but they're all good guys. I don't know a guy that came out your program that I haven't met, and I was like, that's a good dude right there. So that's what it's all about. You mentioned that. That's what it's all about. So let me pivot right here. And you were a coach's coach, and you did all that. But how did Bailey Harris first know he wanted to be a coach? You were a three-sport athlete in high school. A lot of people don't know that you at least three, if not four, and played a lot of sports. But how did you know you wanted to be a coach?
I always wanted to be a player, an athlete. Like, I thought I was going to be a professional athlete. Now, you couldn't have been any further from the truth there. I just wanted to play the game. I loved it. I went to Presbyterian College. I signed, thinking I was a basketball player. And I got there and found out otherwise. I had a great high school career, and I just didn't transition well to college basketball. And oddly enough, I got started in track. Chuck Jordan was the track coach, legendary coach down at Conway and some other places. Yeah. And he got me. I'd never run track. I played 4 sports in high school, and track won one of them. And Coach Jordan, pretty much, you tired of sitting on the bench, Harris? And I'm like, yeah. So he said, well, we don't have bench warmers in track. So he got me into running track, and been running and coaching that ever since. But I was ready to give up on basketball as a player. And Coach Butch Estes, I guess he saw something in me, and he called me in my sophomore year, and he's like, no, you're not playing anymore, but I want you to stay involved in the program. In my junior and senior year, he had me be a student assistant, and that was back before you had a million coaches on the bench, and it's just myself and Coach Nybert and were the 2 assistants. So I actually got a lot of responsibilities and duties as a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, and learned a lot about the game, and probably learned more not finishing my career playing, but from that side of it that helped me get into coaching. I didn't know that's what I wanted to do going into college. I give Butch Estes and Greg Nybert a lot of credit in pointing me in that direction, kind of mentoring me.
It's good. You mentioned Butch Estes, and we segue a little bit here. So in the spring of '85, they had an open tryout at Presbyterian for players. I was coming out of Chesterfield High School, and my high school coach, Coach Russell Warner, who was at Thornwell Orphanage.
Who's the Clinton guy? I'm a Thornwell grad. Yeah, I know Russell.
Yeah. So Coach Warner's my high school coach my senior year. He got me a walk-on tryout at Presbyterian. The weekend I went and tried out for the team, he took the Furman job that same weekend.
Yes, that was my senior year. So coach went to Furman that year, and I went to Coastal and stayed a year, and then went to Furman the next year to be back with him. Yeah, I didn't realize we had that connection. Russ and I are both Thornwell grads. I know him well.
Great guy. He was my coach my senior year at Chesterfield. That was his first year up there. He was great guy. One of the most organized coaches I've ever been around. Very good guy. I read your bio and I was like, oh wow, that's good stuff. But you made a point about track, and I got to give some shout outs to that too, because you were 9 years as a head track coach, 8 years as head girls cross country coach as well. I don't want to leave that out. 4 region championships, 18 years, and you're currently the boys cross country coach. Yeah, 4 state championships in that, 15 region championships. So it's not just basketball. A lot of people don't realize how diverse your coaching resume really is.
Well, I was a multi-sport athlete myself, and when I took the job at Lexington, I took it as head basketball coach and assistant track coach. The track coach left after 1 year, so they gave me the track job. Okay. I did that as the head coach for 9 years, and then it just was a better fit with cross country. And I'd never run cross country, but the track running background fit well there. And we had some really, really good. We won it 4 years in a row.
Wow.
That's probably one of my highlights of my coaching career. I had my 2 sons on the team, and one of my sons led us to our first state championship. And
wow.
We just built a program at Lexington that Sam Oxley was one of my assistants, took over for me, and he's got it rolling. They're have continued that thing really well, and they've turned it into a powerhouse.
I did not really, the more you talk about it, I can hear the passion in it, by the way, too. I know. And I watched you coach basketball. I saw the passion there with the towel and one of the pictures you sent me, and it'll be up on our promos and stuff. You're being emotional. You've been
cross country, very different sport. Like my kids, because most of my kids didn't cross over. Cross country, it's a very different animal. We got guys, going 10 and 12 mile runs in the summer. That's not what I needed basketball players do. And I wasn't that basketball coach that rolled the cross country. That wasn't the way it went. Yeah. 2 different groups. And the kids that ran cross country for me, to hear them talking to the kids that played basketball for me, they're like, we're not talking about the same guy. Like, that's not even the same person that I know. So, definitely a very different take. They're not. Now, I did the one way I did try to coach cross country like basketball, like I wanted to be important to the kids and I wanted to do things for them. I wanted them to get recognition. And we held very high standards. This wasn't the, hey, anybody can be on the cross country team. All you got to do is show up. No, we got workouts. We're going to be the best you can be. And we sent a ton of kids on to college with cross country. I had way more kids go to college and run cross country Division I or whatever than I did in basketball.
Played 4 sports in high school. The only sport I ever quit in my life was cross country. I have respect for cross country. I never quit a thing cross country. I was a skinny freshman, and the stamina, I wasn't strong enough. I was weak. I said, I can't do this.
So most people don't know this, though. Our first state championship, 2009, was a pretty big upset, and we knocked off Ridgeview. And my man Brian Rosenfields was the cross country coach at Ridgeview.
I remember Brent, the current AD at Ridgeview. I forgot he started out as cross country and JV basketball over there. Yes.
And Rosie and I, for 2009, 2010, we were the 2 best teams.
Wow, I did not realize there's so many stories within the story. That's good stuff. So, Coach, so you mentioned, and you touched on. I'm gonna go back because you said after leaving Presbyterian, the Blue Hose, in your athletic career, you went and became one of the youngest head coaches we've ever had in the state. Tell them again. Where did you go, coach? Women's basketball.
I got hired at age 22 as the head women's basketball coach at Coastal Carolina. It was their last year of NAI. Bobby Richardson, legendary Hall of Fame baseball coach, was the athletic director, and he was trying to build an all-Christian coaching staff. And I went down and interviewed, and I thought, man, I'll take this job. Like, that wasn't what I had on my radar, but a chance to work with Bobby Richardson. Yeah. And I got down there, and I mean, he became like family. I can't tell you how good of a person he is, outside of the lines of sports. But I ended up living with him the first 3 weeks I was there, and it just phenomenal. And I mean, I got down there, I took over, I'm 22 years old. I get down there, when I took the job and showed up, I got 2 players that are pregnant and 2 that are ineligible. I mean, you're talking about a learning curve for a 22-year-old. And here's the biggest kicker to that whole thing. I had a player that was older than I was. And by older, I don't mean like a month or 2. She graduated high school before I did.
What? Like you're elder. You're an elder.
She had a couple of knee surgeries, had originally gone Division I, JUCO. She's 24 years old, and I'm 22. And that was one of my captains. I mean, I learned a lot that year, and I would have stuck with it. They were going Division I the next year. Yeah. Now, Coastal had a lot of issues at the time. They were interim chancellor. They were pulling money from athletics and going Division I, which is not a good combination. Right. And Coach Richardson came to me, and he said, Bailey, I got you into this. He said, if you got any options, you need to get out of here. He said, I'm going to get out of here. They're pulling scholarship money on kids, and it's just not fair. He said, I'm leaving. I brought you in. And so I picked up the phone and called Coach Estes, who was at Furman. Dan Nunnery, who had been one of my teammates, had been there for GA for a year, and he had just stopped. And so it was great timing. The Lord just opens those doors. Absolutely. And Coach Estes was like, I got a GA spot for you. Come on. So I went up there, spent a year and a half there, got my master's degree, and was able to work with Coach Nybert, who was the assistant coach there, longtime PC coach, Coach Estes, Jimmy Gaffney, who I'd played with, and Al Daniel, who's one of the all-time great people on the planet. And I got to work. That was the coaching staff I got to work with. And so great influences on me. I learned a ton again. Yeah. And then it was again, Lord opening and closing doors is just kind of the story of my life, because the NCAA was looking to get rid of a coaching position. Back then, you only had 5, and one of them was a GA and one of them was a, quote, part-time. Yeah. And they were looking to get rid of that. But the NCAA, believe it or not, was looking to get rid of a position. Now there's, 27 guys on the bench. And they're looking to get rid of a position. I'm thinking, I got one more year, and then that's the job I'm trying to get. And they're going to eliminate those across the board. I'm never going to make the jump. And I started looking at some high school jobs, and I didn't know a soul at Lexington. I looked at Greenwood and Lincoln County, Georgia, some other spots. And, just literally by the Lord, there's no other explanation. Lord opening and closing doors. Ended up in Lexington, didn't know a soul there. They had 6 coaches in 10 years and were coming off a 1-19 season. But I just had a feeling when I visited with the people, I'm like, with good people, you can work. When I got there, it's not like we had bad players. I mean, we had good players. They just didn't know how to win. Right. And we had success right off the bat with good people, and It
You mentioned
also was the right fit for me.
I was about to say, so fortune, the Lord, the universe, the Lord blesses those who are prepared and connected. Connections are good. Preparation, though. Sound like you were prepared for what you had to do.
Yeah, I had for that age, for 24 years old, I had a lot of good experience, and I looked at coaching kind of as a calling. Like I say, I kind of got in there, thinking I was going to be an athlete, ended up being a coach, and my dad had been a minister, and I just looked at it as, how can I best serve the Lord? And is it being a minister and going to seminary, and the Lord really opened some doors on, through Coach SD's like, no, coaching's where you can be more of an influence on people than you can as a minister. And so I've just always kind of viewed that as, that's my angle to coaching is, to be able to help kids. And honestly, I feel like the high school level more effective than the college level. So when you put all those things together, I was the head coach of 67 different teams at Lexington High School between track, cross country, and basketball. And
that was your calling.
Yeah, just the number of kids you come across. And I taught U.S. history, love that. So,
Coach, I'm looking at just hearing you talk at the very opening of this episode. You were talking about playing golf with your people and touching, the fact that you still have those relationships showed that the calling was right. It was the right thing to do. And you touched so many people over the years, and they have not forgotten it. And we're going to get to that coaching tree in just a bit. I'm going to got a couple of steps to get to. We'll get to that. And sometimes, you can look at the fruit. That's part of your fruit, right? The fruit of your labor.
Sure.
Are these young men who and women who've gone forward to do big things. But I want to stay right there. You came out of Coastal, and you went to Furman, but you got to Lexington, and that's where the 32-year odyssey, journey, voyage that led to 600 play. You're number 6 all time in wins, 2 state titles, multiple times making deep playoff runs. What are some of the things that you think of the most in your time at Lexington? What are some of the memories? I know the players, the people. What are some games or moments that just when you look back as a retiree, kind of semi-retired, what stands out to you?
I mean, oddly enough, when people ask me about, do you miss it? Of course I miss it. But my role, we can get that later, but my role at Ben Lippen allows me to stay involved in athletics and coaches and all. My wife misses Tuesday and Friday night really bad. She still hasn't gotten over me retiring yet. She really enjoyed it. And you can't do it without a wife that supports that. And Beth Harris is a Hall of Fame coach's wife. She's fantastic. We're never been able to be successful without her. But, June was my favorite month of the season. You played 25 games. You got to know your kids on a more personal level because that was back in the days where you went to team camp and you were there for a week and then you come home and you go to another team camp for a couple of days. So you got to know your players better and you could you found out what you had, what we got to work on for next year, kind of where people fit. I really enjoyed that part of it the most. Favorite games, people ask me about that all the time. I mean, obviously beating Irmo for a state championship because back in the 90s, Lexington Irmo.
Oh, man.
I mean, it was people just can't understand the intensity of that
rivalry.
It was unbelievable. And they had beat us 15 times in a row, and they were the 2-time defending state champs, and they'd beat us twice that year. And we finally got the best of them in 96 in the state championships game. So obviously that game stands out. Yeah. And honestly, the game, we played Berkeley in the second round in 2012, Shaq Rowland versus Bruce Elliott. Now, it's Berkeley versus Lexington. The gym was the fullest I've ever seen the gym during that run. Yeah. And Ellington went off. He had 30-something. Shaq had 30-something. Yeah. Shaq hits a couple of free throws with no time left to put us in overtime, and then we blow them out in overtime. But I remember watching the game, and I'm in a totally different world during the game. Like the building could burn down behind me, and you'd have to tell me about it later. I don't. I'd find my wife before the game because once it starts, like I am totally zoned out. And I remember watching that game thinking, man, this is fun. And I thought, somebody's going to lose this game. That's not going to be good. I thought, what am I it was a phenomenal game. Those two guys put on a show. Both teams played with a lot of heart. Ellington just was you could tell, even in defeat that night was a class act, and you knew he was going on to greatness. Yeah. So that game truly stands out. The 2000 team with Sheldon Everett and that just undersized crowd, knocking off Marlboro County and Tymier Zimmerman was
Yeah,
was huge.
I was at that game.
That was huge because they were so athletic, and we looked like a bunch of rugrats.
Yeah.
And but it was some rugrats who knew how to play basketball.
Your system, you had a system that worked. You had players that fit the system. They were disciplined, coach, and that's coaching. A lot of that's coaching, and that's when I first started hearing. I'm not from Columbia originally. I came, out of college in '80, in '90, whatever, and I started hearing around 2000. Bailey Harris is that kind of coach. It's coaching. It's coaching. The players make change, but at some point, and I'm gonna ask you, at what point did you know it got to the point where your name was really out there, and you became a legend? But it became a point where it was acknowledged that you were an X and O's guy, and the reputation grew. When did you really know that was around?
I don't know that I ever really thought about that. I mean, when I first got started, I'm trying to copy Tim Whipple. Like, I'm watching his guys, thinking he's got the same type guys I've got.
Yeah.
Lexington, Irmo were very similar communities in the 90s.
Yeah.
That's what I got to work with. How can I get them to play? Because I thought he kind of set the standard. And then, not making this a racial issue, but then the inner city Columbia guys at that time were George Glimp, Ben Trapp, Carl Williams.
Yes.
And I'd been good friends with Jim Parker before, white guy, inner city Columbia.
Yeah.
So because of my relationship with Jim Parker, and for whatever reason, Glimp and Carl and those guys took me in and were so good to me, but their style of play was so different than anything we were going to do at Lexington, just with the personnel.
Yeah.
But like George would always come, I would get George to come talk to my team before the season started.
Yeah.
I would always try to make sure I scrimmaged Eau Claire and preferably at the Rock Pit.
Yes.
Just for that, experience. Like, if you can play there, you can play anywhere.
Intimidating spot, yeah.
But I never really thought about that. I'm just always trying to be the best version of me. Now, we had a great run, I think, from 95 to 2000, like a 6-year stretch.
Yeah.
We were Final Four times.
Yeah.
Won it twice. We had a really good run through there with not always the same players changed over.
Yeah.
But it has a lot to do. And that's right before we split with White Knoll. So you split with White Knoll.
That hurt some. Had to hurt some
a little bit.
Yeah.
And then right before we split with River Bluff, we go a 3 years in a row of making the Final Four and 2 of them state championship appearances. Yeah. And then you split with River Bluff, and your talent, so living through those splits will humble you a little bit because you lose half your talent. Absolutely. I don't care how you slice it. You lose. Absolutely. And honestly, this was a crazy stat. In 32 years, I had 3 guys transfer to Lexington and start the year they transferred. And one of those was Bert Cromer, and he moved to Lexington before I did, so I don't think that counts. So this transfer thing it just didn't happen. As many people as moved to Lexington, they were moving for academics, not basketball.
Good point.
And so we pretty much just had to, take what walked through the door and develop them and get them better. And I just put my mindset to that early on. We were going to try to develop the talent for what we had, the best we had. And roll with it. And most years it worked.
Well, you mentioned some names earlier, Trapp and Glimp, George Glimp. And of all the people that I wish were here for me to have on this podcast, Coach Glimp was, I'm his adopted nephew. I didn't get to play for him. I'm not from Columbia, but I got to know him. I got to care a lot about him. And I wish he was around for me to talk to, because I got a lot of information from him. But all those guys, Coach Williams, may rest in peace. Coach Glimp, may rest in peace. Your name was up there with those guys, though, Coach. But that George Glimp was a special guy, though.
People don't understand how special George was, and not just in the coaching, but just in the community and the stuff he did for his kids. They just, and it wasn't just, he would have been like that if he hadn't been winning state championships. And if he hadn't had, Bud and Jermaine and those guys, you would have still gotten the same stuff out of George Glimp, because that's who he was. And,
absolutely.
I got to see those guys. Like I say, I spent the whole time trying to get my guys to, to play as hard as Irmo, because those guys, Whipple's as good as it's ever been.
I hope to get Coach Whipple on here as well as time goes on. But you mentioned some of your players. Name some of your players that went on the D1 and some guys that just ring out that people may recognize or maybe not, that just came through and really excelled in your program.
Man, I told Ann Long one year she had more Division I girls on one team at Spring Valley than I coached in 32 years at Lexington.
Yeah,
I just didn't really have them. Tim Heskett, probably the biggest name, went to Oklahoma and had a really good career for Kelvin Sampson at Oklahoma. So I'm a big Kelvin Sampson fan. Tim had a really good career there.
Yeah.
Teron Wright, that was on that same 96 state championship team. This is a kid that career high in high school was 19. He didn't average double figures. but was a phenomenal. Goes to Air Force Academy, walks on, and his last 2 years was all WAC and all Mountain West, and had 39 for a career high against SMU. A guy that had 19 points, never scored 20 in a high school
You
game.
were holding him back, Coach. You were holding him back.
I held him back. He was such a defender and a distributor, just one of those ultimate glue guys. And he got to Air Force Academy and just had a phenomenal career. Brett Jones probably had the best career of any of those guys at Presbyterian as a D2 player. He was D2 All-American a couple of times, Conference Player of the Year a couple of times. I don't know if you've been to PC lately. The scoreboard on the home side is the Brett Jones scoreboard. Like
I didn't realize that.
He had that good of a career. So Brett was phenomenal.
Let me say this about Brett. I got to coach Houston in AAU for a year or so. His son and Brett is just a great guy. I never around Brett. He doesn't ask about my son. My son was on that team. Son didn't start. My son didn't start. Brett. Every time I see him, he asks about my son. Never fails. And I always ask him about Houston. But he's a great guy. By the way.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, we really did not have guys that went on to great careers. I think I had four guys that signed Division I, and Heskett's really the only one that really had a great career. Teron Wright didn't sign. He ended up walking on and having a heck of a career. Alex Spots was a really good player that signed at Rice.
Yes.
Didn't have a great career. Kenny Burr signed at Loyola, never really panned out. James Stokes had signed at Citadel. James's guy ended up in a car wreck and ended up in a wheelchair, for 25 years. Yeah. So really just didn't have the Division I guys, guys like Tyson Balknight, Devin Leifridge, Ben Lee. Those guys were really good D2 players. Yeah. Mason Carver off my last team had a great career at Anderson. Yeah. A lot of good D2 guys but honestly, we made a living off guys that were just good high school basketball players that embraced their role and loved the game.
And that reflects a lot on coaching system and discipline as well, Coach. So that leads me. I had to ask that question first because I want to get to this coaching tree, Coach. Talk about you may not off the top of your head be able to do it, but your guys are like ants. Your coaching tree. Everyone you turn around there's a former Lexington player coaching. Can you just name some of them who are out there coaching? They're coaching big time programs and doing it all out here.
Yeah, and I'm old enough now that heck, I've got a bunch of them that have retired and gotten out of it. Most of my guys that were college coaches have gotten out of it by now. But honestly, I think that's why we were able to do the things we do, because I had guys that had such good basketball IQ, and they go on to be great coaches. Well, that's because that's how we won games was playing smart and playing hard. Guys like Justin Smith, who was a rugrat of a player. He goes on and was Nybert's assistant coach at Presbyterian College for 10 years. Yeah. Sheldon Everett just got out of coaching college basketball. He's been a college basketball coach for 15, 20 years. He was at Missouri State most recently. Yep. I was fortunate enough to catch back up with him and play golf this week. Yep. 15 years as a college basketball coach. Sheldon Everett, Kenny Burr spent a long time as a college basketball coach at Winthrop. Yep. So a lot of those guys who were at the college level, most of them are out of it. The only guy I've got left still in college is Corey Hendren, who was my 2012 team. Okay. And he is a junior college coach at Tallahassee Community College. Just won Coach of the Year this year. Won their conference. Phenomenal coach at the JUCO ranks. So he's a head JUCO coach. The rest of those guys are high school coaches and have had some really good ones. Teron Wright, that I mentioned, is actually out of it this year, but he coached at Air Force Academy. Okay. And then he coached some high school basketball in Colorado. I think Brett Jones is one of the best coaches in the Midlands at Dutch Fork. Agreed. Been at it a long time. Agreed. Ben Lee, that just stepped down at River Bluff, won a state championship a couple years ago at River Bluff. Fantastic. Yeah. He's a class of 99. He's been replaced by Will Clark, who's class of 2001. Yeah. Played on that 2000 state championship team. He's taken over at River Bluff. Thomas Ryan at Dorman, arguably as good as any in the game right now with his record. Thomas is a 95 grad of Lexington. Zach Rich just left Spartanburg after being head coach for 4 years to go back to Dorman with Thomas. Right. He's another Lexington guy. Yeah. Lamar Davis, they don't call him Lamar anymore, but it was Lamar and Lamont Davis, the twins that played for me. He goes by another name now. He's at Airport. I'm sorry. He's at Airport. That's one of my guys. He was on that 96 state championship team. Tyson Balknight, phenomenal year at ALA this year. He's actually going to leave ALA and go to Ben Lippen with another one of my guys, Jay Reed. And Tyson's going to be assistant at Ben Lippen
Okay.
with Jay Reed, who's another one of my guys. The crazy thing there is both those guys' dads coached with me. Jay's dad was on my bench for 17 years.
I didn't realize that.
And Tyson's dad was on my bench for 29 of my 32 years. So those guys have known each other a long time, and that had a lot to do with that relationship.
Wow.
Jason Harmon, that recently coached at Northside Christian, one of my guys. Philip Blake coached a little while as the athletic director and coach at Thornwell. He's out of it now. And then a couple of former assistants. Davis Bound is killing it at St. James down at the beach.
Okay.
They've been really good lately. He was assistant for me on my last couple teams. Sam Brown over at Columbia High School was assistant with us.
Okay.
Gordon Stollard is up in the upstate.
Did you say Liferidge? Did you say Liferidge yet?
Devin Liferidge is one of my all-time great guys. I coached all three Liferidge brothers. You know, Devin just left Greer and went to Raven Gap. We visited him this year. My wife and I went up and spent a weekend with them. And got to see that set up at Raven Gap and watch his team play. Wow. Devin's one of those guys that has always been really close to our family.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of guys, and I left some. Tad Smith's a girls coach in Kentucky, I believe. Yeah. His team made a deep run this year, so Coach, got a lot of those guys out here.
I put you on the spot. This is almost hard. You did a great job. I'm remembering all that. That was almost like a recitation. That was an Easter speech right there.
I keep up with those guys. I mean, that to me is what it's all about. I love those guys, and a lot of people don't realize this is my last year. Coached 30 games, and we played 30 games that last year at Lexington, 2019. 8 of the 30 games, the head coach for the other team was a Lexington alum. And had we beaten Berkeley in the lower state, we would have played Thomas Ryan for the state championship. It'd have been one more game against an alumni. And I didn't like that part. I never liked playing against my guys.
I can imagine, Coach. That's got to be a bittersweet thing. And you speaking of that, let me jump in and say this right here, because I called the game when the upset. A lot of people still call it one of the biggest upsets in state championship history. Dorman was on a 4-peat, looking for a 5-peat and 5A, and Ben Lee's River Bluff team. Me and Kerry Rich got to call that game on TV down up at USC Aiken, and they had to be tough, brother against brother. But you sitting back watching that, and I think you were there. How does that feel, seeing two of your guys, knowing one of them's going to be the champion, one's got a dynasty building, the other about to make a name for himself? What was that like?
There's a lot of conflict going on there, because that's two great guys. And Ben Lee not only played for me, but he also was assistant with me for a long time. So
true, right,
a lot there. Thomas and Ryan and I are so close. I coached 3 different Ryan brothers. I had a Ryan on my team for 9 of my 32 years.
Wow.
3 different Ryans. So, and to be honest here, no disrespect, with the Lexington River Bluff split, I'm not necessarily a Gator fan because of the Lexington River Bluff split there.
I get that.
But this is Ben Lee. And in all honesty, he had not won one, and Thomas had won a few.
4 in a row at that point.
Yeah. So, I'm going to be happy either way on that one.
Yeah.
Probably glad to see Ben Lee get it done. Brett Jones had played it. We had back-to-back years. There was Lexington guy against Lexington guy for the state title. Right. Thomas beat Brett in one of those other years. And, you're kind of pulling for the guy that hadn't done it before.
I get it.
You'd like to see them get a chance.
Yeah.
But I'm never pulling against Thomas Ryan, I can tell you that.
Yeah, he got it going up there. And that program those during that run, they were nationally ranked most of 3 of those years, I think. So it's got to be great. I like the Papa Bear, the head of the whole organization. It seems like the Lexington connection. That's you, and it's got to be a lot of tangled emotions as you mentioned there. So with that being said, I'm gonna take a break from that and step away and ask you something whimsical right quick, because I always throw this in. These are called timeout convos when I do this. So right. Timeout. A little bit about you personally now, and then we'll jump back and wrap it up. If I were to ask you right now, if you got Spotify or Pandora or whatever people listen to, what is Coach Bailey Harris, Hall of Fame basketball coach, Christian man, family man? We get to your family to manage, basketball legend. What's the last 3 songs, if you can name on top of your head, that you listen to?
I saw that question, and I don't know that I can give that answer. Spotify. I'm an 80s guy, so 80s music all the way. I'm a huge 80s funk music guy. Give me March Day and the Time is probably.
Let's go, Coach. Yeah.
Hey, so but at the same time, I love Christian contemporary. My wife and I have been to a couple of Lauren Daigle concerts. So,
Okay. Yeah.
I'll go some Christian contemporary.
Okay.
And I'm definitely coming back with some Bar-Kays and some Morris Day and some 80s. So I go to sidetrack story. I'm a student at PC, and my roommate and I are going to a Bar-Kays concert at the Greenwood Civic Center in the 80s. We walk up to the one, I kid you not, racial profile, and at its worst, the guy goes, fellas, Lee Greenwood's next Friday night. Like, dude, we are here to see the Bar-Kays. Can we not get in?
Hey, doggone it, you got us mixed up, buddy. We're here to see the absolute Bar freaking K's tonight.
Yes, 100%. And then I know I'm the same guy that'll go chill out at a Lauren Daigle concert. So,
hey, diversity is the key, Coach.
Yes.
Diversity is the key. But I love the Bar-Kays too.
Just don't throw country music out. I can't handle it. I'm not a country music guy.
Yeah, I can't. I get every now and then, but yeah,
Nah.
I'm pretty clear. I'm an 80s guy. You and I both grew up with Casey Kasem, the Casey Kasem era.
They have not replaced the 80s music yet.
No, it's great stuff. Man, that is good stuff, Coach. So in that same vein, what is a talent? Now, we know you're a basketball, you got cross country. I know you play a lot of golf now, but what is a skill or hobby or something you got that might surprise some people?
Yeah, I don't think that I play golf is going to surprise anybody, because that's my wife referred to that as my part-time job. I play a lot of golf. I love it.
I got to get you out there. We got to get out there and play, Coach.
We will do it. All right. I can. It's at 63. I can still ride a unicycle. How's that?
Wait a minute. Still right? A unicycle? What? Wait a minute.
I learned to do that when I was a kid, and I can still ride a unicycle.
How did you just happen upon? How did you first learn to ride? How did a unicycle just pop up in your life, Coach?
I'm just one of those guys that just don't tell me I can't do something. Like I'm motivated that way. You don't need to pat me on the back. Just tell me I can't do something. So like, pogo stick, unicycle, those kind of things. When I was a kid, like, let me try that. Like, I like that. And
Coach, you got me on that one. So 2 things about that. First, that you ever rode a unicycle, and then still at 63 ride a unicycle.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Coach, you got to be careful, man. I mean, you can do.
Yeah, and I still, until 3 years ago, I still ran hurdles. I went to the National Masters Track and Field Championship at North Carolina A&T when I was 60 years old to run in the National Masters. My back does not allow me to do that anymore, so I've had to bail out of hurdling. But I hurdled until 60.
Coach, I didn't play sports on the level you played on, but 4 sports back in the day, and you get in your late 50s. Don't the bones start acting funny?
Yeah, they do. My back does not allow me to do much other than play golf anymore. I can't run anymore. So,
sir, yeah,
walking 18 holes of golf is the way to go.
Man, listen, you walk 18?
Now, if I play somewhere like Windermere, I'm not walking. But at my course, I play at Ponderosa out at Batesburg. It's a good walking course.
Okay, I'm a member at Windermere. I hope that may be where we play. I drive that one, so we'll see about the walking. But
you'd have to catch an Uber between 9 and 10 out there if you were trying to walk.
It is a long deal. You're right. So good point. You got to drive somewhere for sure. Good point. So, Coach, with that being said, I want to definitely touch on this part because I know it's important to you. I know your faith is important. I know your family is important. Talk about your wife, your lovely wife, and your children. I know you want to mention because that without the support of the family, it's hard to have the kind of career you had. So talk about them for a minute.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy because both my boys obviously came up playing basketball. And honestly, I think I'm blessed that they both gave up basketball before they got to varsity. They would have both been good enough to be on the team. Mm-hmm. But when I watch other coaches with their kids playing, like that's tough. It's tough on the coach. It's tough on the kids. But the fact that I got to coach them in cross country, I got to coach both my boys in cross country, and won state championships with both of them. That and nobody's argued about the coach's kid getting playing time in cross country. Like it's pretty cut and dry, Yeah. So I got to coach them there. And then my daughter was a gymnast and she broke her back and ended up being, she decided to give track and field a try, not till 10th grade, and ended up, she holds school records at Lexington in the 100 hurdles and the triple jump. So I got to coach my daughter in the hurdles and my sons. And then my all 3 of my kids were the crowd. Like if you see some of these old Lexington pictures of games, and you got all these people painted up down there in the student section and going nuts, acting crazy. That's my kids in the middle of all that. And they painted up in our garage. I've still got blue and gold paint all over the garage floor because, my wife loved that. She loved, my wife be taking them pizzas out there. So basketball was just a family thing for us, but
Yeah.
really a little blessed that my sons, they loved basketball, but they decided to not play. They were runners,
Right.
and they went on that route. But, and we always, one of the things we really tried to do with our program was to travel and give kids experiences.
Right.
We played in San Diego twice. We played in Vegas. We played in the Bahamas. We played in Florida 10 different times in different locations. We really like to travel. So that was kind of a big thing for our family. Like my family was going, I tried to take all the assistant coaches and their families and their kids. We went out to Phoenix, I think that was like 2013, and stayed an extra day and took every parent that was there with us. And we went to the Grand Canyon for the day. So to get to do things like that with your players, and their families, because we were going, they knew block Christmas schedule off. You ain't going anywhere because we're playing. And we didn't play a lot in the local stuff, which I caught some grief sometimes for not playing in some of the local stuff.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get the kids out of town in a hotel. You go to the Great Florida Shootouts, you get to take them to Disney World. You go to a tournament in Tampa, you're taking them to SeaWorld. And to get to do those things with your players was kind of one of the things we were big on. So traveling with the family over Christmas was big. Tournaments like that. We run AAU terms. You show up in an AAU term, my wife's taking up tickets, my kids are running the clock, daughter's running the concession stand, just
family affair.
And my wife was phenomenal at getting, we'd be playing at Orangeburg on a weeknight, and I got 3 kids and she's got them, in the car and to the games, and just, she wasn't missing anything and the kids weren't. So really, really a blessing.
Coach, you mentioned
them in the other sports was huge.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm sorry if I cut you off, but Coach, you mentioned you coached the whole kid, and that's why you got to give them. You coached the whole kid, not just the basketball part. You coached the individual, so you got to take them on trips. You got to get them life experience. I think every coach is owed that, and I get local terms because I MC, I do PA, and I do TV.
Sure,
I get that, but you gotta, and nowadays it's more acceptable. I think as time goes on, because to get ready for region, a lot of people now they playing the heavy hitters early, then they come back to South Carolina and they try to make a run for the title. Even football teams play out of state now. So
yeah, I mean, we got to play. Look, we played against Kobe Bryant at the beach ball.
Wow.
We played against Dante Culpepper.
Really?
We played against Jaleel Okafor. We played Deron Williams, Bracy Wright. I mean, you get our kids together and they start naming off who all we played. I mean, at one point we played against Garnett, Jermaine, and Kobe.
That's special.
That's fun stuff. You go to the Beach Ball Classic and you play. We played Kobe, and you're watching Mike Bibby play, and you go down to Florida, and I was talking about with Tyson Balknight the other day. Keon Dooling's guarding him. Keon ended up being the 5th pick of the draft that year.
Right.
And that was our only loss in Florida that year, and we got kind of hosed in that one. But Major Parker and Keon Dooling, and we lose by 4 or 5 to those guys.
Those some strong names right there. I remember Keon Dooling with the Missouri. Had a great career at Missouri. Played at the Lakers.
So I love. We went to Florida 10 of my 32 years. I like taking those trips. Families like going. Going fun places to go. Torrey Pines out in San Diego. We did.
Was
that
there any golf involved? Any golf involved in those?
Usually not. Every now and then it was. I think we played in Phoenix one time, but usually not. And that's probably why I play so much. I did not get to play much. Obviously when I'm coaching, it was one of those things. You play a couple times in the summer, and I said, when I get to where the schedule works, I'm playing a lot, and
you're making up for it now, Coach.
I'm a man of my word.
I'm gonna get you over here to Windermere. I'm gonna get you over here on my home course, man, and get you out there.
We'll schedule a home and away. I'll get you out to Ponderosa.
There you go. We'll do home and I might be driving behind you at Ponderosa. I don't know.
That's fine. You can ride anytime. That's not a problem.
My God, I appreciate it, Coach. 2 more questions. I'm gonna get you out of here. And again, I really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation. I always enjoy talking to you, being around you, and enjoy covering you and calling your games over your outstanding career as well. But this could be I'm going to ask you 2 ways to answer the way you want to. Your favorite memories of your career, or what is basketball giving you that you cherish the most?
I'll probably hit both those. I mean, basketball has given me so much. Like a lot of the places that I've been, I would never go. Like I coached a Georgia, South Carolina All-Star team in Aruba, and my wife got to go with me. I wouldn't have gotten there at that point. We took our team to the Grand Canyon. It's the only time I've been to the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
So basketball has taken me a lot of places that have been fantastic. But, hopefully the relationships that I've gotten out of that has been, far and away the best thing. The best memories. I mean, winning a state championship in cross country with my two sons, you know,
gotta be special.
You know, that's pretty good. Watching my daughter, you know, win the region in her events in track was pretty special. But just some of those teams, just watching those guys achieve things and being proud of, and honestly, I think it made it a little more special that we didn't necessarily have, you know, the headline Division I players. We just had guys that love playing basketball, and a lot of times they knew that was it. Like after this night, this is the last basketball I'm going to play.
Yeah.
And you know, they were pretty realistic about it, and you get a lot out of those guys. And
I agree.
You know, that just the relationships out of it, and even it's not just basketball. I got an email this week from a guy that I coached cross country in 2017. He wasn't ever even on my varsity. He was just a JV guy.
Okay.
Well, of course, we're so deep, you had to be pretty good. And, you know, he was telling me about, you know, he'd run like 3 or 4 marathons in the last year and a half and was wanting to use me as a reference on an engineering license. I'm, you know, by all means, you know, so to be able to connect with those people, you know, I coached girls cross country for 8 years and crazily enough, I'll run into the kids of those girls that I coach now, you know, they're high school athletes, and that's really cool to see that. And, you know, I got to play golf today. I played with Jason Kochcroft, who 95 graduate, and his son, and, you know, to see his son, who's a high school golfer out there,
the next generation,
like, you know, these guys they're doing good in life, and that makes you feel good.
Man, that's good stuff, Coach. Wow. That's good stuff, man. How would you like Bailey Harris to be remembered? Last question. How would you like Bailey Harris to be remembered? I'm gonna steal an answer like all good coaches. You know, there's nothing original. You steal everything. I heard Reggie White ask that question way back, and he said, "I want to be remembered as a man of God that impacted others." And I would prefer that to be how I'm remembered, as a man of God that loved my family and cared for my athletes. And it's crazy with the connections. Like, you know, there's some of my players that I coached 30, 40 years ago, and I keep up with them. They're speed dial on my phone. I keep up with them all the time. And they're players that I coach that, you know, I hadn't seen or heard from since. I think that's just how it is. You can't be an impact or an influence on everybody. And I don't even think you're set up that way. You know, Lord puts certain people in your life, and that's just kind of how it goes. And that's how I'd prefer to be remembered. Bailey Harris, man of God, leader of young men and women, outstanding coach, outstanding father, husband, outstanding citizen. I am so glad that you stopped by Hough Nation Sports and had a timeout conversation with me. I thank you for your time, Coach. And you got my number. Let's stay in touch and let's make that golf happen.
We will go home and away in golf for sure.
Let's do it. I appreciate you, Coach. Thank you very much for sharing some time, man. And we'll be talking. This ain't the last. We'll be talking again in the future. Okay.
Enjoyed it, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Thank you, Coach. Have a good one.
Thanks.
All right.